Welcome to Friend or Foe, the series where we pick apart the characters from some of our favorite games to figure out who is a friend, someone we don't need to worry will stab us in the back, and who is a foe, someone who would intentionally bring harm to the group if given the chance. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're simultaneously going backward and forwards in time as we explore the story of Piper Wright from Fallout 4. As always, you can find a link in the description to a playlist for this series for those long nights where you just want to sit back, relax, and listen to a bunch of breakdowns all at once. The first time we meet Piper in Fallout 4 is outside of the gates of Diamond City as she's arguing with someone from security over a speaker. She's been locked out of the city by order of the mayor, and she's more than happy to take advantage of the player being there as we walk up and she lies that a caravan has just arrived with goods for the city. Well, normally that's the way that it goes. In this particular playthrough, we were interrupted by Bethesda's poor game design, but I digress. Walking through the gate once it opens, we are greeted by the mayor of Diamond City, known only as Mayor McDonough, who isn't too pleased that Piper found a way back into the great green jewel of the Commonwealth. It doesn't take long to find out why he's so angry with her, as the pair get into an argument about an article that Piper wrote in the latest edition of the city's newspaper, Publick Occurrences. It turns out, Piper isn't just a normal citizen of Diamond City. She is the founder and proprietor of the only newspaper in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, a lot of what happens with Piper in the game is dependent on the player and their actions with her. You can unlock her as a traveling companion early in the game, and she can go with you on most of the missions in the base game and the expansions, meaning her story can vary wildly from one playthrough to the next. Because of this, we're going to focus on a few key points in her backstory and talk about her role when it comes to something as broad as the free press in Fallout 4 and beyond. Starting with her background, Piper was born in a small, unnamed settlement somewhere in the wasteland. Her sister, Nat, and her lived with their parents, and her dad was a part of the local militia in the settlement. It isn't outright stated in the game, but if I had to guess, I'd say he was probably part of the early Minutemen. At some point, her dad discovered a plot involving one of the militia's leaders, a Captain Mayburn, where Mayburn made a deal with a group of raiders to let them invade and capture the settlement. Before he could tell anyone, her dad died in what Mayburn claimed was an attack by raiders, though that account didn't really sit well with Piper, who decided to start digging to find the truth. In the end, she was able to figure out not only what happened to her dad, but also bring light to Mayburn's plan and ultimately save the town by warning them ahead of time about the impending attack. And it was this event that showed her what people are capable of when they know the truth, and that started a fire in her for uncovering things that other people tried to bury. At some point after that, she and her sister moved to Diamond City and she started up a newspaper named Publick Occurrences, a name that acts as an homage to a real-life paper from 1690s Boston, founded and published by a man named Benjamin Harris. Harris's version of the paper was the first multi-page newspaper in the British colonies, and only managed to put out a single edition as it was promptly shut down for publishing an article about the French and Indian Wars. The article detailed the poor treatment of French prisoners of war, among other news about things like a smallpox outbreak, and angered the colonial government enough that they not only shut it down, but also passed a new rule requiring a license to publish newspapers, which ostensibly was enough to prevent the formation of any other papers until 1704. Like Mr. Harris, Piper has a tendency to call out those in power, and she would wind up facing several attempts on her life over the course of running her version of Publick Occurrences. The first attempt happened right after she started the paper, as she highlighted a cartel of caravans that had been conspiring to drive up prices on their products. Now, In the modern world, that kind of practice is illegal, but they don't have laws like that in the wasteland, so the only recourse to fix that kind of conspiracy is to call it out and let the public outcry take over. But doing that got her name on their radar, and she would wind up being poisoned when she went to grab a celebratory drink at the local bar. She was thankfully able to get the poison out of her system before it did any real harm, and the people responsible wound up in jail. But the finished articles weren't the only risk that she faced, as she also wound up being nearly executed for just investigating a case of foul water at nearby Bunker Hill. That instance involved some members of the children of Adam, and she ended up becoming an acolyte of Adam in the process, as she pretended to have a religious experience just before they killed her. So she's had a pretty wild life, but why exactly does she keep at it with all the risk? Throughout history, people have managed to take advantage of positions of power to control and even bring harm to others in a myriad of ways. Everyone from government officials to religious leaders and those who have been able to amass more wealth than they know what to do with have used their influence to some pretty awful ends. But, time and time again, there has been one thing that has worked to thwart the plans of those who would abuse their power: information. When people find out they're being used, or that some kind of massive injustice exists, they tend to rise up and fight back. An easy example is the Revolutionary War in the United States, where information brought about the fall of the British monarchy's rule over the colonies and managed to bring about a new nation in the wake of a violent war. But even that wouldn't have been possible if not for the people willing to call out the abuses of the king in newspaper articles and pamphlets for all to see. And that point was recognized by the founding fathers of the United States as they wrote into the Constitution, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." That text is the full First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and the part about freedom of speech and the press is the most important piece when it comes to making society better. Leaders and writers alike throughout history have known that fact, which is why the powerful tend to try to shut down a free press, while the advocates of freedom and improving life overall fight to defend it. Piper is one of those advocates, and in this case, we even see the opposing side in Mayor McDonough, who is constantly trying to shut down Piper's operation and discredit her. Now, Fallout doesn't exactly get into the weeds of what a free press means, and we don't get to know the nuance when it comes to Piper's methods, so we have to make some assumptions when talking about her role in Diamond City overall. For one thing, we have to assume that she's done her due diligence when it comes to gathering information. This assumption is based on what she tells us about the situation with her dad and the Caravan Cartel, as her getting the facts right about those stories would be pivotal when it comes to her building trust with her readers. She got the facts right in both instances, and things turned out for the better. Had she been wrong, had the raiders not shown up after she called out Mayburn, or had the caravans not been fixing prices, the stories in her paper wouldn't carry any weight, and it would be seen as nothing more than a tabloid that was just making things up. This is important because one of the most recent articles in the paper, when we first meet her, calls out Mayor McDonough for being a synth. It's a story he fights back against, and one that seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back, as he's desperately looking for a way to discredit her and maybe even get rid of her for good. And that story is such a big deal because people don't trust synths and would toss him out of town if it turned out to be true. And that is the flip side of the free press that we don't often talk about. The impact that a news story can have can wind up being rather large under the right circumstances. People win and lose elections, power is transferred between groups, and entire societies rise and fall based on public opinion. And that public opinion is based on reporting from news outlets and investigative journalists. And that kind of power comes with a certain responsibility to make sure the reporting is accurate and fair, and to ensure it is done with the impact in mind. For instance, if McDonough is a synth, but that fact doesn't actually hurt anyone in the city, it might not be something that needs to be reported on, at least not in the way Piper is calling it out. McDonough being thrown out for the wrong reason could open a power vacuum in the city that winds up being filled by someone far worse, or could wind up bringing the city down altogether as no one trusts anyone else to lead or make decisions to protect them. And this is where the only real knock on Piper comes into play. Piper seems to be aware of her responsibility to report the truth, but I think she goes a bit far when it comes to her reporting on things like the Institute and synths in general. She knows people are being abducted by the Institute, and that some of them are being replaced, but she only has part of the picture, and her reporting is actually doing harm to the trust that people have in each other in the Commonwealth. In order to properly call these things out, there needs to be a way to tell if someone has been replaced, or some indication that the Institute has bad intentions. Otherwise, she's being irresponsible in her duty as a reporter. Her intentions are good overall, but she needs to work on her presentation skills for some of her reports. But that brings us to the point of the video in general. Is Piper Wright a friend or a foe? All throughout the game, she is trying to do the right thing. She is constantly calling out injustices and fighting to help those who can't stand up for themselves. She'll get upset with the player when they participate in things that aren't good for the people of the Commonwealth, and will even call us out for joining groups like the Brotherhood of Steel, who hoard technology and knowledge, as she believes the truth should always be at the forefront. That belief, however, does hurt her a bit because the reality is that people in general are kind of finicky and will panic or rush to judgment when the truth isn't put in context. Publishing a paper that talks about the Institute and speculates on their motives and practices, while pointing out that anyone could have been replaced by a synth without any way of differentiating between a synth and a person, is irresponsible at best and harmful at worst. The only thing that saves her here is that she isn't intentionally doing harm, she's just trying to inform people of the facts of reality and has good intentions overall. With that being said, Piper comes out as a friend here. She's actually one of the more fun characters in the game, in my opinion, and has a lot of fun dialogue as you spend time with her. She'll also open up over time about how she fears her sister is going to become like her, showing some recognition that what she is doing might not be in her best interest, as the risk of calling out people in power is high. She doesn't really talk about how her actions could directly impact her sister, however, which is a shame because I think she probably would have been smart enough to realize that leaving Nat alone while she goes off hunting stories might not be the best idea. What would she do if someone kidnapped Nat or did something worse to get back at Piper for a story they didn't like? It's also worth noting, since I brought it up earlier, that McDonough is actually a synth, though her speculation about it wasn't really enough to verify, and she really shouldn't have published the news without some stronger evidence. It is possible to hack into McDonough's computer and find out about who the mysterious courier that meets with him every couple of weeks is, and to tie that information back to the Institute pretty easily. And I wish more than anything that Bethesda would have included those little tidbits in a conversation with Piper that resulted in the paper being published to prove who he really was. But that wasn't a possibility as things are. That's really all I have to say about Piper, but I want to know what you think about her in the comments below. Did I miss some detail that should have put her into the faux category? Or was I spot on in my assessment of her as a friend? If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to Lost in Games here on YouTube so you don't miss any future Friend or Foe episodes, where I'll be breaking down characters from Fallout 4 and other games. I've also got a weekly series here on the channel called Philosophy and Ethics in Games, where we break down the stories in games like Fallout 4 and use them as thought experiments to learn more about ourselves and the world around us. If you want to help the channel out in other ways while getting cool perks like having your name on the screen, you can sign up for channel memberships here on YouTube, head over to Patreon and become a patron, or head over and check out the membership program on my website, where I share things outside of the main series that I have here on YouTube. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.